The Department of Justice has now formally asked the federal judge assigned to Jeffrey Epstein's case to unseal grand jury testimony. This following the president's demand to release any and all testimony as he faces increasing pressure from his own base. But legal experts warn the move raises a litany of legal and ethical issues and might ultimately answer few of the conspiracy-fueled questions circling around Trump world. MSNBC legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance joins us now. So, Joyce, what's the likelihood of a judge even allowing this? And if so, what kinds of information might we see released and redacted? Because focusing on this specific grand jury doesn't cast some kind of wider information net that MAGA seems to be looking for and was promised here.
That's absolutely right. And the key point to remember here is there's a huge amount of evidence in this case. We know from reporting that 1,000 FBI personnel were pulled off of their normal daily tasks to review 100,000 documents that were collected during the investigation. But that's not what the Trump administration is talking about releasing. Instead, they've asked a judge to release testimony transcripts. And when a federal prosecutor goes to the grand jury to indict, all they're doing is giving the grand jury evidence that supports probable cause to believe those charges should be brought. So it's a very slender piece of the evidence. Here, it's likely that it could be a summary witness, an agent testifying on a hearsay basis to what they learned during the investigation that was relevant to the charges brought against Jeffrey Epstein. So is it possible that the judge will turn even that limited piece of the pie over? You know, this sort of a request doesn't fall within the federal rules of criminal procedure, which very vigilantly protect the secrecy of grand jury proceedings. There is some case law in the Second Circuit, though, that says a judge can order turnover if there's another compelling interest. And so the Trump administration is saying, Judge, there's a lot of public interest in this case. We should turn it over. And that would set sort of a crazy precedent. It'll be interesting to see whether the judge goes for it. The reality is this is like everything else in courts, will take some time. And Donald Trump knows that delay in the courts is his friend. And if he can tie this up in court, perhaps the public's interest will shift, we'll move on to something else, and he'll be able to walk away from this undamaged.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the argument in favor of releasing these kinds of documents. But at the same time, what kind of ethical questions might it bring up if this is the precedent that is set here?
Right, I mean, what could it do in other cases, let alone in this one, where we have victims who were minors at the time that they were abused? There are a lot of questions about how much material would have to be redacted, even if a judge ordered turnover in this case. But grand jury secrecy is important. That's how prosecutors are able to encourage witnesses to come in and tell the truth. That's how people who commit crimes are brought to justice. The secrecy of this process is not only enshrined in the law, it just makes good sense if we want to be able to go after serious crime and prosecute it with integrity.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Epstein's former attorney, Alan Dershowitz, suggested on Fox News that the public's questions might better be answered if sealed records were released. Take a listen to what he said.
The information that hasn't been requested is going to be far more informative and far more relevant than the grand jury information. Grand jury information is narrowly tailored by prosecutors. So what's much, much more important is discovery information, depositions, and other things that came out of the Ghislaine Maxwell case, that came out of other cases that were pending in front of federal judges.
One of our colleagues, MSNBC legal analyst Christy Greenberg, called this motion a red herring to distract from the evidence that matters, like witness interview notes, videos, photos, etc. What's your take on that?
Christy's exactly right here. Dershowitz is talking about the civil cases where victims sought compensation on the civil side of the house from people involved in Epstein's scams. But none of that comes to grips with the fact that the FBI has apparently created an index of the 1,000 documents that were put together during the investigative phase of the criminal prosecution, and they've identified which ones mention Donald Trump. You know, that compilation was done using the taxpayers' dime. It really smacks of politics. If we want to talk about turning over information to the public that gives us a sense of what's going on here, Why not start with that index showing where Donald Trump's name popped up during the investigation?
Joyce Vance ending with a question that many people are asking, especially